Okay, everyone. Look, welcome to NDIS Code of Conduct, Regulations, Legislation, Practice Standards, all of the legal stuff and what does it mean? And how can you best understand it? My name's Gina Ingerell from Effective Policy. I'm a sponsor for the Facebook group, which is NDIS Providers, Participants, Sole Traders Directory. So my apologies to anyone who's watching this after the live event, who tried to figure out how to get into the live event and couldn't. I just wasn't able to get past a hurdle on the live. So I've gone back to the way I'm used to doing it, which is on Zoom, and we will post this to the group. So all good. So let's just kick off. And as people come in, they come in. Hi, John. Um, John, I'm just starting. I'm recording now, so I'm just going to get going. And if people come in, they come in. So that's all good. So if you're planning on staying in, John, what I'm going to do just at the second is just make you a co-host. And if you're in and anyone needs to be let in, it would be really appreciative to let them in, but don't feel you need to stay because you don't. Right, so let's have a look. So look, some really I wouldn't even say that it would be really common questions around all of these legislative and regulatory things. I think that a majority of people are just not sure what they are and how they fit and how to use them. So I think there's only a selection of the market that would ask me these questions because you have to actually have some understanding of what they all are. And I think most people are wandering around in a fog, trying to figure out find their way down the streets of the NDIS. And it's almost like it becomes a luxury to be looking at those things. And I think once people have a lot of their other things sorted out and they've got that all in order, then they might start to say, well, what are all these and how do they fit together? Because I'm sure they seem fairly obscure and like they're unrelated, but they are most certainly related. And the way I think, given that 80% of the market are not from health and human services, and may not have knowledge of how these things work from a governmental perspective. I think it's just best to start at the beginning. It always is. So so the words that all of you guys watching now and in the future will know is that you've got some practice standards and you've got a code of conduct. Now, some unregistered providers, they may not know that. And that sounds unusual, but they may not know because nobody's actually making them do anything at this point. So the market is showing at the moment that we have about 21,700, I think it is, registered providers, and it has between 155 to 270. They're not quite sure because billing changes from month to month, between 150,000 to 270 unregistered. And if you're not being forced to use these things, then there's only a select few of those unregistered providers who are going to. But obviously, that's all coming to an end and people will be made to register in the very near future. So they will become very familiar, we would hope, with all of these, with this landscape, this legislative landscape. So let's start at the very top. So what you guys would see is your policies and procedures and your codes and your forms and your everything else. And then you'll be familiar, those who are registered, with the practice standards, which is a framework that you're asked to adhere to. So where do they all come from? They're not just random. So what we've got is at the top of the food chain, obviously we've got a government department, and that government department is they're the custodian of the entire scheme, if you like. So I'm just going to my pages. So we've got legislation. So to be able to enact a program, a government program, we have to have a legislation which guides it. And the guiding legislation is the the NDIS the NDIS legislation, basically. So this is the commission page. I was actually on the legislation page. So we've got the NDIS Act. So this is at the very top tier, and this is what enables this scheme to be able to function, and it outlines certain things like it uses the words legislation, and then it uses the words rules, and it uses the word codes. And all of those things are tools of a legislation. So there's an act of parliament or a legislation, and underneath that, there are lots of things to help apply that and implement that. And that is codes of conduct, codes of practice, a practice standards, which is the quality and safety standards, and regulations. Okay, so they are tools of a legislation. So they all fit nicely underneath. So legislation is at the top of this pyramid, at the very top. And then we've got a whole bunch of words which hopefully will be coming together now. We've got restrictive practice rules. We've got the SDA rules. We've got a quality and safety standards set of rules. That underneath that quality and safety standard rules, we've got codes of conduct, codes of practice. So these are all the instruments, which is the word that we use in government, instruments and tools to implement this big piece of legislation. Okay. So that's where all of these hail from. Okay, so here we go. It's talking about rules. And here's a whole lot of the rules. There are rules. Remember, it's an instrument. It's something that helps to implement this big, enormous animal called the NDIS Disability Insurance Scheme Act. Yep. And they've developed these rules. It's almost like if you've got a set of policy, well, it's not almost like, it's exactly like, okay. So here we go. Here's the NDIS scheme. So what happens is that that's developed. Then the government department itself will develop its operational guidelines or operational policies. That's for them to know what their roles are in that, because although as a government employee, you would be referring to an act a lot of the time, you would also be referring to something that has translated that act for you as a government worker, which would be an operational guideline. Okay. And that's really clear, for example, in supported independent living. Supported independent living is talked about in the Act. Of course it is in the Act of Parliament. However, to make it a bit more succinct and be able to pull all the gobbledygook from that piece of legislation, and most of the time it is gobbledygook, because it's legal terminology, they make this operational guide, and they have that. And then what should happen from that operational guide is then some policies and procedures for the programs, the funded NDIS providers to use. So we've got legislation, we've got all the tools that are also having to accompany that legislation to make it workable, rules, codes, etc. And then somewhere there has to be, and then there'll be that operational guide for the government department. That's not for us to bother with, but it's interesting to read. I always do grab the operational guidelines from every program because I can really turn those into, in fact, they inform writing policies for me. So you've got the operational guidelines, and then we hit the funded services, the people who are getting the money from the government department, the providers. And that's where you need some policies and procedures. Okay, so before the NDIS came in, we had statewide funded services, the block services, and every operator, NDIS provider, equal to an NDIS provider, but it would have been called a disability service provider. Every disability service provider would have to write their own. It was unheard of that there would be any package off the shelf of a policy and procedure, unheard of. But it just never happened. There was nobody selling policies and procedures before the NDIS came into play. But that's because we had the count that I've just given you of how many providers there are now, 21,500 registered, and between 150 and 250,000 unregistered. That's a lot. In the old system, we had around 2,000 providers Australia-wide because they were all vetted and applied by tender to become a disability service provider under the state funded services. So everyone wrote their own, and they were the big organisations. We're talking, you'd barely get an organisation that only ran in one state. Most of them were Australia-wide, like your House with No Steps, which I know has been renamed now, but it always comes back to me as that because I've been around for a long time. You've got a Ford, you've got Salvation Army, you've got St Vincent de Paul's. You had all the big players in the market back then, 2,000 roughly across Australia. Everyone wrote their own. But now, under this Act, and that this is a free market, some have written their own, but what it gave birth to, the NDIS gave birth to a lot of consultants writing those policies and selling them. And I could promise you that the market couldn't exist without that. So whether I think it's right, wrong, or indifferent doesn't matter. The fact is that a market of 300,000, nearly 300,000 providers couldn't. They're not all going to be writing their own policies and procedures because actually a lot of providers just wouldn't be capable of doing that, and that's just a fact, not a judgment. So it's that set of policies and procedures that you use to operationalize your business that is a direct descendant of the legislation, those instruments of the legislation, the codes, the rules, I'm not sure if I've left anything out there, codes, rules, all sorts of other, they call it regulation, actually, so there's regulation as well. So those policies and procedures that you're working with, hopefully, on a daily basis or referring to when you need to know something, they are all derived from all of those things above them in the pyramid, yeah? And so the other thing, because if you cast your mind back, if you've been around a while, you'll know that the practice standards, the NDIS quality and safety framework or practice standards didn't come in until the 1st of July 2018. So from 2011 or 12, I get my years mixed up, sorry, but maybe 12 when it rolled out, 12 or 13, when it started to roll out in the two trial areas, Geelong and the Hunter Valley. There were no quality and safety standards. There were about 4 itty-bitty, teeny-weeny, meaningless kind of standards, and I don't actually think that they were forced on anyone. I'm pretty sure that prior to the 1st of July 2019, because I didn't come on board as a consultant and NDIS auditor until then, 2018, I'm pretty sure that there were actually no hoops to jump through other than a very mild registration process. So really, we've only seen some robustness since the 1st of July 2018. And so, yeah, that has really given birth to consultants putting together these policies, procedures, tools, and providing a lot of guidance. So I'm always going to recap it. It's just the way I do that. So we've got legislation, which sits with the government department. We've got all the instruments that help to implement that. We've got as a standard operating system or operational guideline for the government department, which is also available to the providers should they wish to read it. Put you to sleep, but there you go. And then we've got the policies and procedures, which we call operational policies and procedures, yeah? And they're the ones that you guys are running your businesses with. So this is where everything comes from, and this is going somewhere. So it means, well, if you're looking at any of the codes of conduct, codes of practice, tools, practice standards, um, etc. They have all come from somewhere, and that's where they came from. So they all link up. And the important part of that is they're made for uh, being able to implement a program. They're made to protect the government. They're made to protect the service user. They're made to protect, um, they've been written for all those reasons to protect staff. They're, they're basically capturing everything that should and could protect all those players in the market. Okay. Now, we've unpacked, and we'll go through a few so that you know. There's no point in me opening them up. I think that I'm happy to have questions and discussion and stuff like that, but I think that understanding the framework and how it all fits together will be the important piece of the jigsaw for you guys who are probably going, what is all this and where do they come from and what's the point? Yep. So, like we started with the Act, the rules. There's a lot of the rules that you might be familiar with. So I mean, the rules that I'm most familiar with, of course, are the restrictive practice rules and the SDA rules, because I deal with them on a weekly basis, whether I'm auditing or etc. or delivering, training, it'll be based on that stuff as well. So we've got rules on. You can find rules. Remember, this is an instrument to implement this so you can understand it. That's all gobbledygook in the Act, and this helps it to become disseminated, understood, and able to be followed. So, becoming a participant. So, there's a rule around how participants are supposed to be able to become participants, the rule around support for participants, rules around children, and that would be about protections and what sort of services there might be. Nominees, the nominee of a plan, there are rules that define that. So at any point in time, when you need answers to things, you can find them here. It's just that going into the ndis.gov.au or even the Commission site is a bit of a box of chocolates. And to be honest, most of us find that Googling the question rather than going into the actual site will be the easiest way for you to get directed back to that document that you really want. Then plan administration. There are the rules around the plans administration. And then registered provider supports, protection and disclosure of information, intergovernmental agreements. So there's a bunch of rules, and I would expect that they have some rules underneath them as well. Okay. So we've started at the top of the pyramid. And so now we'll go to what does anyone who might be here think might come, like I've said, the Act, the operational guidelines, the rules, and then the policies and procedures to implement for you, implementing providers for you to implement your programs. Yeah. What do you think might come? And doesn't matter whether anyone gets this or not, but there's your policies and procedures, the ones you might have written yourself, or you might have purchased them from someone like me or any of the others in the market. What do you think sits directly under them? Does anyone want to have a stab? What do you think might sit? Because remember, I've gone legislation, operational guideline for the government department, which is also available to you guys if you're bored and you need to go to sleep at night. And then the rules, the codes, all of those instruments that outline the gobbledygook in the legislation and make it come to life. And then you guys, of course, you need your policies and procedures. So you need something to implement them with too, don't you? So that's your forms and the templates and all those things that you get, as well as your policy and procedure. Yeah. So you've got your policy and procedure manual or manuals, and then you've got all of these forms, tools, templates. Yeah, they help you to implement what you're doing. And what's informed them, obviously, is, and I think I left out the thing at the top there. Well, not at the top. We've got legislation, operational guideline, and then we've got the rules, the codes, um, of conduct, there are many of them. And then we've got the practice standards, or what we call the NDIS quality and safety standards. Then your policies and procedures, which are written based on all of those things above. Okay. There's a lot goes into them. And then you've got to be able to implement them. And it's a bit like uh, what I explain to people who are new and they're going to audit and they are be unclear about what it means for them, etc. I look at it like a pie chart for you to be able to be considered compliant and ready, etc. You're going to need about two-thirds of a pie chart. So let's cop it into three. Two-thirds of your pie chart are going to be documentation. So that's not real good with percentages, but that's like 66%. So 33% is going to be policy and procedure. The other 33% is going to be the forms and templates that you use to actually deliver your program. And the last third is actually some knowledge. So it can't just be, that's the thing that shocks some people, I think, in getting ready for audit or just getting ready to deliver, is if you can imagine that, okay, we can give you the policies and procedures, we can give you the forms and templates, but what if you're missing that last third and you don't have a lot of knowledge? It's going to leave a big gap in the quality of what you're going to deliver and how much of a learning curve you've got. Or, as I would say to people, the person you need to hire should be guided by that missing piece. And that missing piece is, if you don't have the knowledge, then hiring or leveraging off someone that does is really important. So they're the things that you need underneath that. And so within your packages, you have tons. So a couple of the most important things, and I'm not sure, I mean, I'm not sure how well they're understood. I know that by some they're understood really well, and by others, I think people are struggling to find their feet if they are within that grouping that don't have the knowledge. Like the best policies, I can give you the best policies and procedures, the best forms and templates, but I can't make a provider have the knowledge in 5 minutes. It's just not possible. So there's that way that you need to look at what you're bringing into the market and where you need to gain traction, which might be in the knowledge area. So here's what you'll get as a provider. So now we come to those sort of nitty-gritty things, which is you've got an NDIS code of conduct, and this is for workers. Okay. So there is an NDIS code of conduct for workers. This is really long. There is a one-pager. So it's, some people might choose to give this to a worker. My guess is they're probably not going to, because most part they're not going to read it. But your policies and procedures, rest assured, if your policies and procedures are written by consultants, most of them will have already incorporated what's in here, in this guide, for you in your policies and procedures. But yeah, so we've got this NDIS code of conduct for NDIS workers. Then we've got, there is, I think we'll scrap that one. That's a bit complicated. Then we've got what's going on there? We've got the NDIS code of conduct for, I've got the live site here. We'll come back to that. And back to here, legislation, guides and rules. Oh, here's some lovely rules too. We'll put that code of conduct at provider level away for a minute. This will be a really good example of what I was talking about, what rules actually unpack the legislation here. So we've got in the rules section, we've got the code of conduct rules. That's what's informing your policies and procedures. That's what should inform any training that's written. You've got your provider registration and practice standards. That's what we've actually based your policies and procedures on. And then we've got the behaviour support rules, which I said I deal with these and the SDA ones a lot. Then we've got the actually, there's some rules around the transitions, whether that's transitions in services going from one type of service to another. You can bet that there'll be some transitional rules coming out as we welcome in all the changes from the review and the Royal Commission, but that's in the future. There's a massive set of rules on the incident management scheme. There's a massive set of rules on the complaint management scheme as well. Remember, these aren't just random documents. They're simply unpacking all of this. So if you know that as many times as you might see 50 or 100 documents and you think, what the hell is all that about? Just know that it really all comes back to this legislation and it's a way of unpacking it. Put it in the same box as you've got policies and procedures and you need forms and templates to unpack those policies and procedures. This is the one key document, and all the other little things that you see around have all come from that. In one form or another, they've come from that. And it's just because they know nobody's going to be able to digest this. You couldn't throw the legislation at anybody and expect them to be able to come up, smiling. So yeah, these are all the bits and pieces that support that legislation, help enact that legislation. Now, coming down a little bit more, incident management, complaints management, provider definitions. That's exciting when you need like rules around the definitions. National disability protection, protection and disclosure, which is when you need to tell on somebody, and how they say they'll protect you, which we can see doesn't happen if you've been watching the news lately. You will see some people who it's all very well to have this in a legislation, but I did see someone who blew the whistle on a organization called Cocoon, and that was a couple of years ago that they did that, and they've been sued enormously for defamation. Nobody has stood up to help them, and I think that's very sad. Nobody has stood up to pay her bills or protect her. So National Disability Insurance Scheme Provider Definition Rule. Provider definition. We've got a rule around provider definitions. So yeah, that's fun. National disability, but I mean that does come into play at times. There are times when the definition of a provider is really important. National Disability Insurance Scheme Protection and Disclosure, done that, sorry. National Disability Practice Standards. Now, this very much has been my life since late 2018 it was, because I became a quality standards auditor just before I became a consultant, actually. So yeah, that's a really big, really important to me, that stuff. And your policies, if written, if you've ever, and for everyone watching afterwards, if you've bought some policies and procedures or you've tried to write your own, which I really commend you for if you have, and you've been given a non-conformity, it will be because it hasn't aligned to this, the practice standards, okay? Then the worker screening thing came out, which I'm so glad it did. That's really good. It did add a whole new layer of work for everybody, but I'm glad it did, and I think it's really useful. And there's a short summary of the NDIS rules. Lots of fun, lots of good reading. But remember, I always want to come back to this is where it all comes from. It's not like these are all the things that you see and that float around and get released. They're not these random documents. They're iterations of or updates on previous versions of themselves that have all come from the legislation. Okay. So moving down, we've got guidelines. Love a good guideline. Okay, so we've got, so obviously when I'm writing a module two policy and procedure or module two training or module 2A training, I'm going to be looking to this. That's where I'm going to be looking. Yeah. And of course, I don't just put that stuff. I think being a good trainer and being someone, we put our own experiences in there as well to make it feel a bit more real, and experiences and knowledge that I get from my colleagues as well. So, but this is where we would come to. This is our go-to. Um, and Registered NDI, this is a guide on registered NDIS provider notice of changes in events. Wow. I mean, that's just when something changes with you as a provider, if you're registered, right? What's expected of you. And that'd be a book worth taking to bed, I'm sure. But it matters because there has to be a rule and someone has to be able to refer back to that rule. So there you go. So then we've got procedural fairness. Well, that's a good one. I've actually never had to pick that up. I probably have used it when I wrote about procedural fairness in the human resources policy. Um, but it's not something that comes to mind very often. But if I'm writing a human resource policy, or if I want to know if I'm being dealt with fairly by the commission themselves, because it's not just about the providers leaning on these for how they behave. These guys have to behave in a certain way as well. When I say that, I mean the NDIS Commission. So yeah, a lot of my stuff will have been informed by that as well. Approved quality audit scheme. This tells you what the auditors, and not enough people want to read this. And if you read this, you'd be surprised at how often the quality auditors and the quality audit companies actually don't follow the rules. It's actually one of the most disturbing things for me, I think, is the behaviour of the auditors in the scheme. Not all of them, just a lot of them are good, but some of them do not follow the rules, probably never looked at that, probably never will. And it's certainly not governed, or they're not held to account for behaving in the way that they're being asked to, or following those rules as well. We've got a guide on high intensity personal high intensity skill descriptors. Oh yeah, that was fun when that came out. So that came out after the module one itself. So module one being the high intensity personal activities. And then there was just absolutely no guidance for an auditor to be able to audit an organization as to whether their workers had the skills and experience to do this. So they developed the high intensity skill descriptors, which has been a great help. They've been turned into competencies. So these things will get added when it becomes apparent that whatever's in the Act or whatever they've got already has not been enough and they need to respond to it. And then, of course, you'll see, if I go back to, so before 2018, we didn't have the practice standards. So, of course, we can't just bring out a set of, we're going to invent a quality audit program for all the NDIS providers. It has to be legislated. So changes get made up here to this legislation so that we can introduce new parts. Nothing happens quickly in a government program because of the changes and what has to happen for those changes to be made, which is collaboration and consultation, then agreement of what's going to go in, then the drafting, and then the draft, it'll start, they'll have an idea of how they want the actual change to look, but then the legislation, the gobbledygook, has to be drafted by the lawyers in the department. And then we start once again, okay, we've got to unpack that. How's that going to look? And once again, we get our guides, our codes, etc. So yeah, we've got the skill descriptors, and then we NDIS practice standard, the high intensity personal
Hi,
activities.
Gina, sorry, you're not sharing your screen.
No way. Oh, thanks, Ali. That's disappointing. But there wasn't actually anything much to see, but let me that's disappointing. Well, it says it's sharing. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe I shared
It's sharing now
a
your Google
window
Chrome.
and I moved from there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's where you would come to. I don't really think that, most people wander through here very often, but, this is certainly where everything is held, everything is unpacked, and where you would go to for answers to questions. I think too, it's important, like you've got codes, guides, legislation, practice standards. It would be nice if you could call the NDIS Commission or even the NDIS and ask a question and have faith that you would get the right answer. But I think it's all fairly clear to everyone now that that's just not able to happen. So I say comically, but I actually mean it. you know, ring 3 times or 5 times and take the answer that's most common or that most commonly marries up to another one. Because that's actually the best you can do. In fact, I get more people calling me saying, and I'm sure other consultants do too, saying they've tried so very hard to get an answer to something and they've had, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 different answers every time. Um, these people on the customer service line, which is who you're getting, when you call, unless you're absolutely very lucky and someone senior picks up a phone, which is not going to happen very often, you're getting people who are hopefully looking through this, yeah? But it's the translation of this that only comes with a bit of experience and understanding. So I would like to think that when they're asked a question, they are coming to this. Um, but if they're not, God knows what's happening. And if they are, it's about whether they can translate it properly. And I don't think for a minute that it's easy to translate this. I think you need knowledge and a bit of experience. I think, there would be some jobs where you could pick up a piece of information and parrot that back to somebody fairly securely. But I don't think it's that easy with this. And if Ali is still there, she'll know that we sit around and deliberate about legislation often. So it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. But yeah, everybody's getting some pretty bad feedback. I'll give you one example. So a provider had a situation, he knew there was something wrong. He just wanted advice because he was in a panic where a, a client with an acquired brain injury had requested just to have the one support worker after he had had a few support workers. And we all know about the living alone and the sole support worker rule. But this person had said that's the only person they want. Then he was told by the support worker they were getting married, she and the provider in question. So she and the participant were going to get married. And so he knew, oh God, no, all right. And he's rung for a bit of advice. And this is what he was told. He was told, how dare you stand in the way of happiness between that participant and that person? What a horrible thing to say, that you think you need to end this and report this. And I've never heard I've never had a more ridiculous piece of advice or feedback given to anyone. That's probably one of the worst. Not, not one part of that recognizes the power imbalance, the fact that no one worker was ever supposed to be with a participant, the coerciveness, the fact that he has an acquired brain injury, how vulnerable did that make him? I mean, that's just an example of many. There are some pretty bad feedbacks that are given through the commission because they're not unpacking. They're not unpacking this and they don't have knowledge as well to be able to translate it. Policies. We have some policies which unpack the legislation and we have some frameworks. The Child Safe Framework and the NDIS Quality and Safeguarding Framework, which is the standards. And also, not just the standards, what I've also discussed is the Quality Auditor Guide and rules. And probably in there somewhere will be the guide and requirements from the business that employs those quality auditors. Also, which is good, what's been added to this because of the really funky amount of consultants around who, I would say, I mean, there used to be a saying that went around, we'd go butcher one day, NDIS provider the next, but we could also say banned NDIS provider one day, and then NDIS consultant the next. So they've put in some rules. They've embedded it in the legislation now in the quality and safeguarding framework, and drilled it down to the a bit of an add-on into the quality audit guideline, I think it is, about consultants. I mean, to think that you have to say in a piece of a rule or a guide, which is, part of a legislation enactment, to think that you have to say no banned providers can become auditors and no banned providers or suspended providers can become consultants. Isn't it a sad day when you have to say that? Because that's what they were doing. They would get banned and then go, oh, well, I'll just be a consultant or I'll get a job as an auditor. So that's a bit sad. So then we've got this is probably stuff that you would less be coming into contact with, but still it unpacks the legislation. You've got some stuff around, I mean, there's nothing here that can't be answered. It's just about whether it can be interpreted. And that's the problem. And I guess that's why you have your NDS and you have your peak bodies and things like that to help people to understand how to interpret that. I don't think you'd come into contact with this stuff very much. So then they've, packed it out for you as well, so you can see it. So you've got a really clear picture of a number of codes of conduct. Now you'll have a code of conduct that is, and I'll find it for you because we've got a code of conduct for workers. So NDIS codes of conduct. There's quite a few. So there's a code of conduct for a provider, and there's a code of conduct for a worker. So they both have a different angle. They both come from the legislation. They're just a tool of implementation. So you have, it's about whether you can find it. You've got, it's not really answering it, but I can tell you right now that you have a code of conduct for workers and you have a code of conduct for providers. And it's really important that providers, understand what is expected of them. Now, any other codes of conduct? Yeah, there's the auditor code of conduct. And I wish more people would hold their auditor to account for the way they behave, but it doesn't happen. Apart from that, I don't think we have many other relevant ones. John, you've always got some really good information. Is there something that I've missed here? Oh, he might not be here.
Just give me a second. I can just skip my browser up.
Yeah, not sure. So we got, yeah, code of conduct. And so they're sort of unpacked in many places. We practice standard codes. Yeah. So they're sort of our main ones. Let's have a look on oh yeah, bad request. That helps. Oh, nice. That's an extension. Okay, codes of conduct, 2025. Let's do that. Let's go 2025. Yeah, so we've had an update, 11th of, what's that, 11th of March. Yeah, pretty much this is your, what's the difference? The legislation is the guiding document. The codes of conduct, the rules, the guidelines, the policy statements that may be released by and the operational guideline that's released by the NDIS, they simply refer back to the legislation. They enact it. They're the tools of implementation. And then from that, that is where the birth of your policies and procedures, your forms and templates, the quality and safety framework have all come from. So it all links back. So I hope that that has made some connection to all of the forms that feel like get thrown at you. They're not random. They are in plentiful supply, but they do all come back to that one guiding legislative document, which nobody would want to read. I've had to do it as a policy officer, but it's boring, really boring.
I
That's
actually
why,
I enjoyed reading the Act. It was a lot of fun.
oh
Gina,
my God.
at the start of the conversation today, you mentioned the definition of providers. Now,
Hmm.
marrying that into the code of conduct, who does the code of conduct apply to? Does it apply to unregistered? I mean, I know the answer, but
But
does it does it
but
apply, does
we've
it
already
apply to
said that
unregistered?
there's the code of conduct there's a code of conduct for providers
Understood,
and
but
there's a code of conduct for workers. So which one do you mean?
I mean unregistered providers.
The unregistered providers, they are forced to pass on their incidents. So that didn't used to happen. They had to do a change in the act. Um, and but now the commission has complete oversight. I'm not saying they can see what they're doing. I'm saying they can do whatever they want to them if they know about it. So
The, the,
now,
the code of conduct, though, as a whole, applies to all providers, whether you're registered or unregistered. A lot of people are saying that the code of conduct doesn't apply to them because they're not registered, which is actually not true.
I
It's
think
actually,
that came in with the change when they added incidents to their what's the word, permission to be able to um, uh, interfere with unregistered providers. They also added the code of conduct. Unregistered providers in certain sectors, particularly those within the NDIS, are still held to the code of conduct, which outlines expected ethical and professional standards. So they're held to the NDIS provider code of conduct. So we can do a great post, if you like, about that. And I can also double check that their actual workers are held to it as well. Um, but definitely that's been there now since the incident scheme became applicable to unregistered providers, which has got to be like, I'd say 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, 3 years. It's been quite a while.
and the practice statements. I mean, do they apply to unregistered
No,
providers?
the practice standards don't apply to them.
I
It's
mean,
sad.
these are things that people often ask and
Do
have
they?
misconceptions about. So
Okay, so you're saying like most commonly, people say that doesn't apply to me, so I can outline,
I wouldn't say most
well,
commonly. I'd say from time to time, people
I'm
say,
sorry.
this doesn't apply to me because I'm not registered, or,
Oh,
the,
okay.
or a
Well,
participant
I'll
might
do
not
a
even say
great
that.
list of what does apply to unregistered providers, which is um, uh, a complaints can be enacted on.
I mean,
Um,
the extension to that is, I don't need to be insured. Well, yes, you do, because the code of conduct says you must be insured.
yeah, well, I mean, it just comes down to absolute, I don't want to say the word stupidity, but business stupidity not to be insured.
Oh,
Why?
that's just, I mean, that's a separate question. I mean, people are saying my car insurance should be enough. Well, no,
That's not part of the code of conduct, though.
it's
That's
not. It's a
no,
business decision, but the code of
no,
conduct.
no. They still have to do it because they're receiving government funds.
But
It's a broader one.
my point being, the code of conduct directs them that they must have paragraphs 39 and 50, I think they are, say that you must have insurance.
What
Whereas people,
insurance does it say, John?
let me, one of them specifies it. I'll get it out.
Yeah, it's never not been required. It hasn't, oh, here's a better way to say that. It's never needed a code of conduct for them to have. Um, uh, Firstly, the government funding is all it needs. The fact that they're receiving government funding, right? Um, Government funding is all it's needed for them to have what do you call it? The professional indemnity and the what's the public liability? Public liability, yeah. They've always needed that. No code of conduct needed. Let's just get the word in the code of conduct that you've got.
Okay. Paragraph 50
Hmm.
states NDIS providers should have professional liability insurance that is appropriate to the size of the organisation and the supports and services it provides, as well as the environment to which they provide services. So that specifies professional liability insurance. And 39 says, no, it's not 39.
Yeah.
It's, oh, sorry, last sentence in 39. Providers are also required to hold appropriate insurance, whatever that might be.
Yeah, so that's a pretty broad statement. Um, that's good, but they won't know what that is, which that's unfortunate. So I'm glad that they've added professional indemnity, but receiving government funds has always been enough to do that. But I understand why they did it because if it's not said, they won't do it.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a shame that it only says appropriate insurances.
It's mind-blowing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in paragraph 39. What else in there is strikes your
Oh, put me in a moment. Quite a few things.
yeah,
Um, Let me just go through it and jog my memory. I mean, the conflict of interest,
yeah.
but that's,
What does it say?
I'm just looking for it now.
Oh, cool. And we've just got some conflict. We wondered why the conflict of interest comments were made in the price guide, and we could only conclude that they couldn't get anybody to take notice of it, so they put it in the price guide. Fair
I
enough.
mean, from what I see in the discussion groups, people often say, yes, it's a conflict of interest. No, it's not. As opposed to how do we manage a conflict of interest that we can't resolve?
Yeah, that's why I put up a conflict of interest uh, event. Um, it's just something that people have to learn. For some people it's hard to grasp the nuance because it's not black and white.
I mean,
Um,
particularly in remote areas when your choices are limited.
well, I think it just gets managed. I mean, that's what I was trying to explain to somebody yesterday was what's a of interest in a remote area. Sorry, what's a conflict of interest in Sydney may not be what it may be a conflict of interest, but it will be one that has to be managed in a remote area.
Yeah,
So, and that nuance is difficult for people to grasp, but I've always put that down to that is critical reasoning.
yeah.
And that's, that's why, that needs an entire hour and a half on its own.
And
to help some people.
the new price guide, I don't think this was there before, points to an exact form that needs to be filled out for
No, it doesn't
declaration.
have to be filled out. They've just given people the option. We explored that in November. We went through the form and it was very, very long, and we assessed it against our own form and thought it doesn't add any more value. It's good. There's nothing wrong with what they've put
But
out.
I think it actually said. I know.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say they have to.
I'm agreeing. I think it actually did, and that's what got most of my
No, they have to do a conflict of interest. They don't have to use that form.
Let me just look.
Yeah, have a look. But Ali's pretty
It struck me because I hope I am wrong.
yeah, I do too. Otherwise, I'm going to have to tell Ali she was wrong. I don't want to do that.
That's not my intention.
It's not very often that that happens, but I think this is all good stuff to look at.
Just bear with me.
I will bear with you. So, did you say you have people saying the practice standards apply to you, and then others go, no, they don't. And so that's one thing
Not
that's
very
confusing.
often, but it has
Yeah.
been said.
Okay. Might do a nice post about that. Just for anyone listening, the practice standards should apply to everybody, but they only apply to people who are registered at this point.
Correct.
What else can I think of that
The word,
applies?
okay, the conflict of interest form says
Mhm.
the position statement states that the limited circumstances where a conflict of interest may be unavoidable. In such cases, it does say providers should complete a conflict of
That's correct.
not
Yeah.
the conflict.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we would have used it if it said they had to complete that. We would have, but
say a, so
but what we know from our experience is that it's long, and although we think it's good, we know the longer something is, the less likely it's going to be used.
I stand corrected.
That's cool. Don't worry. Yeah. So yeah, we didn't adopt that. We'll just keep using ours because I think it's too little, too late that they developed that. That should have been, if they were going to do that, they should have done that 5 years ago.
The other topic you asked me about other topics, service agreements, are they mandatory?
That's right. You talked about that. Service agreements, right? So service agreements, another tool to the to implement the legislation, another tool to help you fulfill your policy and procedures requirements. Okay. Are they mandatory? Absolutely, they are. The practice standards say that you must have a service agreement unequivocally. Now, if you're an unregistered provider under consumer law, you haven't got a leg to stand on. If you don't, not a leg. So would I say that they're mandatory if you're unregistered? I would say that under consumer law, you will be in trouble.
I will
So
also
yes.
add to that, if you're earning over $75,000 and or registered for GST, you need a written agreement for your services to be.
Is that written under consumer law? Where'd you pull that one from? Now, the only time that you can get away with not having a service agreement is when it's choice and control overrides it. So if someone says, I don't want one, then you have to note that and say they wouldn't do one. Yeah, or didn't want to for X, Y, Z reason. And I'll tell you where that happens the most. With guardians. They're too busy, they don't want to. So now there is a new part, an add-on to the legislation where if it's a guardian, a email agreeing they are undertaking service with somebody. We've added this to our policy and procedure, etc. That an email will suffice that says they have agreed to take on service for this particular participant. So that is two cases where you can't force them, because at this point, until choice and control doesn't become the overriding mantra of this, they're the only two cases where that happens.
Does a service agreement expire after some time, or can
Under the practice standards, a service agreement can only go for 12 months, or if services change before that, it needs to be updated. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, it was becoming a problem with guardians. I would assume, whether it's because they had too much on their plate, they simply didn't want to enter into something in that formal way. But the fact of the matter is that the email that they have now been told to use, yes, I agree to this, is just as legally binding as the other. I don't think it's right that the guardians get away with that. I think that's the job of a guardian. So it's a bit disappointing. But they were pushing so much that they had to make some changes to the legislation on that. We'll certainly develop a new guide on it, I should say. So we've discussed the conflict of interest. I'm sure people are going to appreciate that. We've talked about the actual mention of professional indemnity and did it say they called it professional liability, didn't they? That's what they called it in the conduct code of conduct. 39, the appropriate insurances, which really is not very clear for people. The conflict of interest, the service agreement, everybody has to, and even if you're unregistered, that is consumer law. More and more we're going to see, rather than people going through the NDIS and the NDIS Commission, we're going to see people just going to your consumer law in each state, because it is consumers and it is law, and that's been in the process of becoming more prevalent for the last couple of years. I was doing law when I did my postgraduate, I was doing disability and aging law. And yeah, it's this is where I'd go. We're not getting much satisfaction from the NDIS, are we? We're not getting them to act on our complaints or our issues. So really encourage people to go to the consumer law department in each of their states.
I've had people show me evidence that their reports to the NDIA have taken up and over 12 months, even just for a recognition that they've looked at it.
I know.
With no outcome, no discussion, it's closed and no nothing.
Yeah, no, it's got to be consumer law, and my colleague Leanne Lilly agrees with me, and so does my other colleague Kylie. It's a consumer. They're a consumer, so they can go to consumer law. So I think it'd be really important for providers to start taking notice of the consumer law in their state. But I think we have a vulnerable population too, and they don't always take up that option to do just that. What else, John?
I just had a topic on the top of my head and it just flipped off, and
Yeah.
it'll come to me in 2 seconds. Just give me a minute.
Okay. So we've got codes, we've got regulations, which I don't suppose people really come into. Do you get many people saying that have confusion around restrictive practice?
Doesn't seem to be.
That's
I
good.
think people got a grip on that.
That's
If you
good.
need if you need it, you need it. But um, people that they seem to be quarantined into the right path. If you know what I'm saying, the people that
Hmm.
do have to restrain people medically or otherwise, there might be a misunderstanding of what restricted practice might be from even just keeping somebody locked in the house or locked in or in the kitchen for their own protection could be a restricted practice. That's not discussed all that much, but
If it were a problem, you'd probably be seeing it in your group. I mean, I always had that like years ago when I first started doing restrictive practice webinars, but I don't know,
I think people
getting the hang of it.
might be worthwhile going through the definitions of what the different restricted practices are because they're actually quite well defined.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll do that in another short one, I reckon.
yeah.
That's easy done, and I actually have complete webinars on that anyway. But the other thing is, oops, don't forget, restrictive practice. Oh, I think sometimes there's still confusion around holding, what we call
Yeah.
the restraints. I saw somebody, and it was a behaviour support practitioner who was banned as an individual from using what they call holding techniques, and they're the things that you might see police using. But really, I could not understand why the behaviour support practitioner was using those, and clearly he got a banning put up there, which is not nice, to say don't do that again. But there is something called clinical holding, which does require some restraints, which, may not be pleasant, but that's for medical procedures. But you need to be very experienced to do that. And there are companies who train. There are a few reputable companies who will train providers on how to do it if it's needed. That's for a medical reason. Yeah. But yeah, that seems to be the most confusing thing in restrictive practice these days. Um, uh, so service agreements, conflicts of interest, insurances, that code might do a bit of a follow-up post when I post this live video around what she said was that confusion or the disagreement between what unregistered providers are actually required to follow. I think that would be helpful. Thank you for pointing that out. Um,
One common topic also recently that's been popping up more and more often is recovery of funds and participants allocating work when there's funds aren't available to pay for the services. So the recourse on the participants and the rights of the provider that needs to be discussed, in my opinion.
Perhaps on a separate one,
Yeah, yeah.
there is a couple of things to that. There's the when services continued to be delivered when there were no funds. And then
Deliberately or otherwise. I mean,
yeah. And then there's the other one where a lot of people are falling into, which is where the NDIS puts a stop on it and won't pay them.
that's another thing. I mean, that's a whole
Yeah,
topic.
I've got a lawyer that deals in that.
I
I met
mean,
him at a conference.
providers are going bankrupt
They are,
at the whim of a decision that hasn't been found
yeah,
guilty on the basis of guilty or innocence.
yeah.
I
And
mean,
sadly, what the lawyer says, his name is Andreas, I think, he said that sadly, even though he ends up winning the administrative law case, sometimes some of them have already gone to the
it's just
wall.
too late. I mean, they've got
Yeah,
staff to pay, they've got bills to pay, etc.
yeah,
I mean, even if they are guilty of what they're accused of, there needs to be a handover technique where the participants and the other people who have caught up in the ripple, the employees, etc., are looked after. A management a management comes in and takes over management as opposed to just stop funding. I mean, just stop funding is just it's
It doesn't seem very sensible.
No.
How about this? Rather than me talk about that because it's not my area, I just know a bit from what I've learned at conferences and that. I'm going to see if Andreas wants to do uh, a he does NDIS providers now, and that's administrative law, and he's gotten very good at working with the providers who have had holds put on their payments.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, some of them have done the wrong thing
Sure.
and
Sure.
some of them haven't.
But
So,
the process of working through that is just, it's barbaric.
yes, it is. It's really silly and horrible. Okay, let's do that. Let's invite him on. I'm sure that will help a lot of people. Um, and then I'll do this post to follow up on the posting of this video and about making it really clear about in those areas of ambiguity where the unregistered providers are not sure what's expected of them, what's mandated. I'll do that. Sounds good. Um, well, oh, Melinda, did Melinda come? You must have been late comer, but don't worry, Melinda. This has been recorded. I'm going to post it to the Facebook group for all to see. And did you?
Melinda's also raised the topic about cleaning businesses, for example.
Yeah.
There is currently a poll, a form to fill out to put your signature on to say raise the rates. I mean, if you're a gardener, for instance, and you've got one lawnmower, and you invest in a couple of $5,000 or $10,000 in a bigger lawnmower, there's no return on your investment, and there's no benefit to the business in doing that, because you're still only allowed to charge $58 per hour, even though you get the job done in a third of the time. So there's no reason for gardeners or cleaners to invest in their businesses and reach economies of scale. And the net result being the NDIS industry is left with lesser skilled or lesser abled providers in that arena.
Yeah, I don't know much about that. I know that I've done a lot of gyms mowing registrations, but so I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that they're not doing well. I mean, that's interesting. I probably don't have a lot of cleaning businesses come to me. I probably have more of the provider ones, but sorry, the service delivery ones. So well, that's a pretty popular service, so they wouldn't want to lose that one. It's really hard to find a cleaner these days because there's so much need from NDIS participants and aged care clients. I mean, you'd find a professional in that could maybe.
Accessibility. Her name is Jan, I think. She's running the petition at the moment.
Oh, I think that would be a really good, interesting one to have on the group doing a live.
Yeah, she posted about it yesterday. It's actually got quite a few follows.
Oh, that's a good idea. See if she'll do a live talk. People need to know. Any suggestions from you, Melinda and Malika, that things that you think would be beneficial for discussion in an event? No? Okay. All right. Well, this has been good. Okay. Thanks for coming along. All right. Oh, what have we got in the chat? Someone might be saying something. Oh, Malika, I wish I'd seen your post. It said, please could you share screen? Yeah, a rumor. Oh, golly gosh. Agreed, we're going through it right now. What is that you're going through right now, Melinda? Oh, the cleaning business, the cleaning stuff. Gosh. Melinda says, about the cleaning staff. Take a cleaning business, for example, $58 per hour does not cover the cost to deliver service and remain compliant. It is out of touch with private rates for good quality business practices. How long does it take to do the lawn? Is that so? That's $58. I don't think my lawn, when I had a lawn, I don't think it was ever done in under an hour, right? And so how is that like? Surely you can't get called out for less than an hour. You got to get it out of the truck and put it back in the truck and I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I better leave it to the experts because lawn mowing service.
But the assumption there is, Gina, that you're only ever going to have one employee and one lawnmower. What happens when you get three employees? You got two really great lawnmowers. You can do 3 times as much work in half the time.
Yeah.
So the price guide doesn't allow for that economy of scale. It just says we'll charge by the hour. It doesn't say we can get 3 jobs done now. It doesn't work.
But what if, here's what comes to mind, and it's my lack of understanding, I expect. But what if a lawn that would take you an hour and a half, right? Let's just say there's an hour and a half lawn, and then that's one person. And then you bring two people with their two mowers and they do it in 45 minutes. So that's what you're saying then, isn't it? That's two people, but all you can charge for is 45 minutes.
Correct.
Bugger.
So it just doesn't work. I mean, the cleaning business coaching arena just saying don't service NDIS participants. It's not worth your while. So the cream of the supply chain is avoiding the industry completely, resulting in lesser quality services.
Can I give you a guy's name who contacted me and he came to an event of mine, and he has a cleaning business, and he sold that, and now he's had his time out of the market and he's back again, and he has a really good system. I think it would be really interesting to have him on. What he actually does, he's obviously doing okay because he's sold and he's come back, and he loves it. And he actually also does what he does. All of what he does in his cleaning are people who are hoarders. So like the hardest of the hard, really. I think that might be really interesting. I mean, look, I think it's fair to say that not everyone is having problem, but there are and the best thing to do there is go, all right, well, let's just hear from people and see what they're doing. And if it's the way they're doing it, that's more sensible, or if it's just luck, or if it's, I just think hearing from people. So Melinda has said, the business has to make a profit. Yep. I can highlight so many gaping holes in the system. Please write them down for me because I've got this plan I'm putting together, which is the systemic abuses of the system. I know this isn't an abuse, but it's an issue. So I'd love to hear. Our son requires stoma care and behaviour supports, but there's no way to figure out his high intensity support need. Our support workers are not being paid for their duties. Chronic disorganisation goes hand in hand with disability and ageing. Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to have a chat with you. Let me put my email in here and then we can have a chat if anyone wants to have a chat. But I'd love to hear about that because I've got this thing that I've built, which is the systemic issues effective policy. What is my email address? But I'd love to hear what you're saying as well. And by all means, please do. I'd love to hear about that. I'll have some lunch after this, but I'm sort of hanging around in the office today anyway, Melinda and Malika. So if anyone wants to have a chat, that's fine while the iron's hot. That's been really good. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about both those things. I'm going to contact the lawyer after this, John, and see if he would do a free what's her name in the group. And I'll also contact Matthew Rashid because he's obviously doing something that's
That would
working.
be excellent.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Any other ideas, Melinda or Malika? Ooh, scammed. No, not nice. Not nice. That's all the not niceness. Yeah, please do email. Yeah, feel free to do that. Okay, well, look, this has been good. I hope everybody else who's going to be watching this afterwards enjoys this and look out for the posts that I do. I'll just go back to uh my code of conduct and pick up on what John's just brought up, which is really interesting. Where can we follow? Oh, me? Do you mean where can you follow me? Okay, you can do me on LinkedIn, Gina Ingerell, or you can do me on YouTube. I'm more active on LinkedIn. I'm a bit of a big mouth on LinkedIn, um, which I can't help because, you know, there's a lot wrong. So by all means follow and join the conversation. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Yeah, it's all happening there with support coordination, let me tell you. Okay. Well, it's really good to talk. I look forward to seeing you again. Spell it. It's INGROUILLE. It's a hard one, I know. Tricky. Tricky, tricky, tricky. Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
See you
you, Gina.
soon. I'll
Thank you,
be in
Gina. That
touch,
was
John.
fantastic.
Thanks, Malika. And thanks,
Thank you.
everyone who watches this by recording. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.